Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 10 o'clock here in the morning on Saturday, September 25th. This is Worldwide Epidemic of Child Abuse and Human Rights Abuses. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And I just wanted to bring out some information. I have, as you can see from my show page, talk a lot about the North American issues of child abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, and whatnot. And I just wanted to include one show a week, kind of focusing on internationally, kind of worldwide, what's going on around the world. And we see this stuff in the paper. We see it in the news. It's all over the place. The situations in many other countries where, there's just a real lack of rights for anyone, right? Any human rights, all human rights. Sadly, and they're even within their own laws, they might have laws in some of these countries where, to protect the citizens of the country, but they're just not being upheld. So that's the whole issue. A law is no good unless it's being upheld, and that goes for anywhere. That's even for North America, that's a situation here. If the laws are not being upheld, then these abuses just continue on, and even when they are being upheld, the sentencing is just doesn't fit the crime. You know what I mean? So I just want to be, a voice out here for people and just to bring out information that I find. I'm always studying. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and which I just love, volunteer position, and I just love doing it. And being a part of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children is just awesome. We're working really around the clock, except for minus the time we have to sleep and maybe work a little bit to make some money so we can pay our rent. But, we're volunteers, and we're doing what we do to try to help stop child abuse, right? And so, but I'm, in the meantime, in between courses at MRU here in Calgary, and so I'm very interested in international international community development, human services, and so I'm in between courses. So I keep studying, and I just keep looking for information, what's going on around the world. I have emails that pop into my inbox all the time coming from IRIN and different news sources, about what's happening out there. And so I'm always reading this stuff, and it's very discouraging. And, even within North America, it's really discouraging because North America, with all the programs in place, the funding, the money that the government's pumping out, tax dollars, our tax dollars, to try to stop and prevent child abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault and whatnot. And it's still happening. It's still an epidemic even here in this country, even with the programs that we have available to help people. So you can imagine what's going on in these other countries that have really no funding, no help from the government, no help from the communities to try to help these people who are suffering in domestic violence situations, child abuse issues. Most of those countries where there's just no access to human services, children, they're just killed, and it doesn't matter. They just bury them out in the backyard and have more kids and kill them too, right? Nobody going on here in North America as well. So that's why I'm just wanting to be one more voice out here talking about this stuff, as well as because I study this, and this is what I'm looking at all the time in my spare time. And I thought, well, I'll do one show on the worldwide epidemic of child abuse and human rights abuses, and to include some of that information too. I volunteer also with the Canadian International Learning Foundation out of Ottawa, Canada. They are an awesome organization, not-for-profit organization that works to fund schools in Afghanistan as well as Uganda, and they're working nationally in Canada as well, up in the north part of the Northwest Territories, and so it's just awesome. And I also volunteer for CHF. That's the Canadian Hunger Foundation, formerly known as the Canadian Hunger Foundation, CHF. They work to help educate people on the issues of the rural poor around the world, and they have projects. If you go to their website, you can see the different projects that they have going on and what they have done in the past to help the rural poor, right, with water issues, food, agriculture, livestock, and trying to help these people to learn to help themselves, right, so that they can learn to grow the crops, to treat their livestock, to how to get the water systems right so that they'll have clean drinking water, right? So this is just such an awesome thing to be able to do, to donate time to, because I don't have a whole lot of money, right, to donate, right? I'm just a working class citizen trying to make my rent every month, and but I do have some time, and so I thought, well, I can just donate my time to try to help out in whatever way that I can. And that's what it takes. It takes all of us doing something, whatever it is within our power and within our control, to be able to help some of these groups out who need a hand. And even if it's just being a voice, spreading awareness, that's the biggest key issue, is to continue to spread awareness, because if we're all talking about it, that means something will be done about it. If we don't talk about it, it'll just stay hidden under the carpet, nobody will care, and many, many people will lose their lives, and then we have to be really glad and thankful that we're not one of those people, right? So that's the whole issue. I also volunteer for the Canadian Women for Women Afghanistan here out of Calgary, Alberta, and that's an awesome organization as well, helping really helping to procure to help women in Afghanistan, right? Because women in Afghanistan years and years ago, before this whole war started back with the Soviet Union, women had really held a lot of seats in government. They had a lot of power. Their voices were heard. They were very much a part of the government in Afghanistan. They could work. They had the right to go to school, and a lot of them were teachers. And they were just really a huge part of society until the Taliban took over, after the Soviets left and the United States pulled out and the Western countries pulled out, mainly the U.S. And then so the Taliban, the people stepped in, these religious fanatics, and took over the country, and that's what happened, and that's why we see what's going on there today. Many of those people, they look to be about 80 years old. They're actually probably only 40. The average lifespan in Afghanistan is really, really low. It's one of the worst in the world. And so those 2 or 3 generations there have never known anything but what they have seen. Their history has been rewritten for them. They don't even half of them realize that women used to hold seats in government, except for the ones who are educated. And that women used to be able to walk down the street and unescorted and work and have a good life, and that they could stay home and just look after their children if they wanted to. They were very much free. And now, they actually have no freedom, period. Their rights were taken away by the Taliban. And so this is why it's so important to know this stuff. You got to know the history, and you got to know what's going on in the background, in the behind the scenes, right? Because a lot of people just think it was always that way. Their own people even think it was always that way because they don't know the history, and sadly enough. So they don't know how to read and write, and they're not told that they used to be free. So that's how you control a people, destroy the history, put them under your thumb, and then rewrite the history and say, this is how it's always been. And after you kill off enough people and then another generation comes along, nobody remembers that they used to be free. And that's what's going on around the world with, these dictators and these crazy people who would like to squash and keep a society underneath their thumb. Right? So this is really pathetic. It's going on today, 2010, and it just makes me really sick. But that's what we're here to talk about, So I found some really sad articles today. Actually, I've been looking at this for about a week now, just kind of looking at some articles to bring up for today. And this one is from Iran, and it was from September 22nd, from Juliet. Actually, I don't know who wrote this. This is from Iran's news. Humanitarian News and Analysis, a project of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. So this is from Zimbabwe. Juliet Mashoko, quote unquote, I was beaten on the head and all over the body. So this is an article from September 22nd, 2010. And Juliet Mashoko, a 61-year-old grandmother, attended the recent Survivors Summit in the Zimbabwean capital, Harare, organized by Heal Zimbabwe, an NGO working, a non-government organization working to rehabilitate people affected by political violence during the 2008 election. She told her story during a group testimonial session. And President Robert Mugabe, leader of the ZANU-PF, and Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai, leader of the Movement for Democratic Change, MDC, must apologize to me because I was beaten on the head and all over the body by ZANU-PF militia and sustained a broken leg. My daughter-in-law, who was pregnant, and my 6-year-old grandson were locked in a house, which was then set on fire. This is the lady's testimony here. See, the Prime Minister owes me an apology because I suffered so much trauma because of supporting his political party, the MDC. So right now, the two of them, Mugabe and Tsvangirai, are in an inclusive government, and their lives have moved on, while some of us are carrying so much hurt, injury, and trauma. So she says, it was just before sunset, and a truckload of ZANU-PF supporters drove into my homestead, located on the eastern outskirts of Harare. They said they were looking for my son, Brian Chimova, who is an MDC counselor for the area. They said since I was not prepared to reveal his whereabouts, I would have taken the punishment they wanted to mete out to him. So they began assaulting her with sticks, and they also stomped on my legs, she says, and hit me with thick logs until one leg fractured. And they took my 6-year-old grandson, my pregnant daughter-in-law, and my 20-year-old son and locked them in one of the rooms. They threw a petrol bomb inside, which set it on fire. That's just so sad. It says, up to this day, their cries of anguish continue to haunt me. I wanted to assist them, but I was helpless as I could not move my legs. This is what she's saying here. I'm not able to provide for myself anymore because of my injuries and destruction of my property. The government should compensate all victims of political violence and assist them to rebuild their shattered lives. And that's just sad. So, this is just the sort of thing that's going on out there. And this is just one person's story, one 61-year-old grandmother's story. And, within these governments, where obviously they don't care about the citizens of their country. And that's really sad. And you have to wonder half the time if even in North America, if any of the leaders actually care about the citizens of the country or if it's just their own agenda. It's all about them, and they just, you have to just wonder because a lot of them aren't speaking out and saying, hey, we do care. Most of them are just thinking about the next vacation and what kind of a big mansion they're going to buy next year with their big bonuses and money that they get, And I know it's frustrating for those people. They have a lot of responsibility, but they signed up for the job and they got votes and they got in. Now, whereas in these other countries, they don't necessarily get votes; they just get in, right? And there's just a lot of political corruption. But we know political corruption exists everywhere, and so it's pretty sad, right? That these people would have to go through this, and we know this is happening all around the world, right? This is not just. And this is happening in North America, believe it or not. I would not doubt that for a second. So here's another one. This is really sad. Now, this is a really quick article. It's just a brief article, but I just wanted to bring it up because it sort of gives us an idea of what it's like for somebody else in another country who's a teenager. And, most of us would think that that's pretty young, 15, 16-year-olds in these other countries. But actually, 15, 16-year-olds in these other countries, in some of these third world countries, is old. I mean, their lifespans are pretty short. And so they're already, once they're able to have children slightly before that age, they're generally married off and sent off to, as for a dowry sort of thing. And, they have to begin their life early, right? Because they just that's just the way it is. Their survival, right, for those people, really sad. But here's an interesting article. It's from IRIN again, IRIN, Humanitarian News and Analysis. It says, in brief, Anusha Ravichandran, please bring my sister back to me. This was from September 24th. That's from yesterday, 2010. Mulatuvi, excuse my pronunciation of some of these words. 16 months after the end of the civil war in northern Sri Lanka, thousands of former rebel fighters are still missing or in government detention, according to the government and local NGO Law and Trust Society. Anusha Ravichandran, 15, and her family lost contact with 16-year-old Dorisa 2 months after the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE, rebels forcibly recruited her in March 2009. Ravichandran spoke to IRIN about her loss, and she says here in quote-unquote, my sister was my best friend. We shared a lot together. Even during the war, she would comfort me when I was scared of the shelling going on around me. We moved from place to place during the war. I did not have many friends, and she gave me everything a friend and a sister can give. The Tamil Tiger rebels, were losing the war. They wanted one recruit from each family. And we managed to hide our sister from the kidnappers, rebels, in 2008, but in March 2009, they took her from us. She got in touch with us through several other cadres, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, who were in the movement in April. She told us the Tigers warned her not to escape or her family would be killed. I know she was scared for our safety. There was nobody to tell when this happened, and there was nobody in control. We hoped that she would return after being conscripted. When the war ended in May last year, we had high hopes about her return, but she never came. Sometimes when I try to study for school, I remember my sister and I feel very sad. My parents are sad too, and we have lost a lot, but my sister is my biggest loss, she says. We have told the Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission and the ICRC, International Committee of the Red Cross, about her fate, but nobody has any idea of her whereabouts. I want somebody to find her, she says. Please bring my sister back to me. So isn't that sad? This is a 15-year-old girl who's missing her sister, who's 16 years old, who was forcibly taken in to be, one of the Tamil Tigers. And, who knows where she's at, whether she's alive or just being held, prisoner somewhere or being used for sexual purposes. I mean, my God, that's generally what happens to these poor women, and even men, like young boys, right? It's very, very sad. I mean, my God. But, who knows if she's even alive. But here's this young girl, pleading for her sister's life and saying, somebody help us find our sister. And I just try to put myself in these people's shoes, because I know what it's like to suffer, in a home that's just full of suffering, you know what I mean, as far as domestic violence goes and abuse and the whole lack of respect and care for people. And I know what it's like to be suffering. And I try to put myself in these people's shoes, and I think about their loss and how they must feel, because I know what it's like to feel that loss of a sibling, and just knowing, even though I know where mine are, they're gone, they're dead, right? One of my brothers was murdered, and another one of my brothers, at the age of 19, one of my brothers was actually committed suicide at the age of 33, and another one died of a drug overdose at the age of 43. So I mean, I got closure, right? But for some of these people, there's no closure. And like this girl here, if she will not be able to find her sister, she'll never know what happened to her. And that's so much of the case here, with missing children, missing persons around North America. It's got to be the same feelings, right? Because you think, well, what's happened to them? And, where could they be? And it would always be this constant aching, nagging feeling inside of you, like, where is my sister? Where is my daughter? Where is my son? Where is my husband or my wife? People who are missing, and it's very, very sad. And so I try to put myself in these people's shoes and think about their situation. And, they're just like us. They have feelings. They care about their families, and some of them. And, it's a huge loss, right? So I just wanted to bring that up because it's very sad. And also, and here's another one. Now, this is really, really something here. I think this article is really worth talking about here. And I'm just going to bring it up right here. Let's see. This is one about domestic violence in Timor-Leste. Let's see. It's Domestic Abuse Survivors Speak, right? This is from IRIN as well, Humanitarian News and Analysis, a project of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Timor-Leste Domestic Abuse Survivors Speak. Dili Suai, S-U-A-I, 21st of September 2010. IRIN says, months after the long-awaited passage of a law criminalizing domestic violence, IRIN met survivors staying at shelters in the capital, Dili, and in the southern Timorese town of Salele, run by the NGO East Timor Women's Communication Forum and Catholic missionary group Sister Servants of the Holy Spirit, respectively. Below are some of their testimonies, and they actually just have a little blurb from some of these women. There's about three, I think. 3 women's blurbs, just small pieces of what their story was like, right? Worth bringing up just to show what's going around the world as far as domestic violence goes, because, hey, it's happening everywhere. There isn't one place on this planet that is unaffected by domestic violence and abuse. It's very sad. And these stories, I mean, they deserve to have their voices heard. I'm glad that they printed this. I'm glad that they're putting this out. Susanna, 16, incest victim with 9-month-old baby. So this is from her. She says, the abuse started when I was 11 years old. I told my mother, she says, who went to the police in 2005. My father left the house but continued to hurt me. He was convicted on 24 June 2010, and we are waiting for a second court date for the sentencing. I went from the northern town of Los Palos to District Bacau and then to Covalima because I did not want anyone to know. I wanted to be a nun when I was 9 years old, but that is not possible now. I must accept my fate and try to give my child a good life. So I swallow this secret, she says. Incest victim with a 9-month-old baby. She's had to bring about her father's a child from her father. Now that is really sad and absolutely pathetic, and it's good. I'm actually it's interesting to see that she's going to say that she's going to try to give her child a good life. I mean, my God, most people would in many instances not want that child and just leave it on the road somewhere. You know what I mean? But this is really sad. She's 16 years old and she's carrying around a baby who is fathered by her own father. If this happens, it happens in North America. You better believe it. It happens everywhere. And it's absolutely disgraceful. People should know better. It's 2010. Hello, let's wake up and smell the coffee. I hope everybody will listen to my other shows too, because I'm just I'm just continually talking about the whole issue of child sexual abuse and the situation and the fact that, hey, it's 2010. Let's wake up and smell the coffee. Not only is it it's always been a problem and an epidemic, it's getting worse because people are actually really, really getting off on this. There's whole groups of people that would like to see the government allow adult relationships with children, sexual relationships with children. See, right now it's against the law, right? There's a statutory rape limit. There's, in each state and within the the United States and even in Canada, the provinces and whatnot, generally around 16 years old. Some states are 17 for, statutory law, and some are 18, right? Depending on what state you're in, but generally it's around 16. But the thing is it's against the law. But there's groups out there who are lobbying the government right now with signatures and petitions that want to be able to, like 60-year-old men that want to be able to sleep with 10-year-old girls, and they think this is okay. Well, they're sick, and this is wrong, and it just seems like it's getting worse. There's so many sick people out there, and so if you're a parent, you better wake up and smell the coffee. This is a reality, and it doesn't do any good to put your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening in your neighborhood, because it is. It's guaranteed probably happen on your street. 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys in North America will be abused under the age of 18 years old sexually in some way, whether it's unwanted sexual touching, exploitation, molestation, or rape, you name it. It's 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. That is a fact. That's the stats. Actually, it's probably higher than that. Problem being is that a lot of abuse is not reported. So, this is really, really sad, right? And then the next story here, Maria, 31, police officer's wife. So this is her story. She says, "How did he hurt me? How much time do you have to listen to me?" She says, "He hit me, screamed, kicked me out several times. This is my 3rd time here at the shelter." See, these are women at a shelter in the East Timor that were in the town of Salele, right? And they're talking about their stories. So she says, "He is a police officer, and I went to the head of police in Dili, but nothing changed. I then went to the VPU, Vulnerable Persons Unit of the National Police, and they helped me file a case in court. But I changed my mind, and before the case came to trial, I withdrew it. Now I am waiting for the court outcomes of 2 separate trials, one criminal and one for divorce. Because of culture, family, religion, I always went back to him. He was threatening me that if I tried to file for divorce, he would hurt me and my family. I would not feel safe, even if he were locked up. But I have faith and want to give the justice system a try. I am not scared to be alone. I think life can be better, and I want to find out." So this is a woman, 31 years old, who's a police officer's wife, who's been, hit and screamed at and kicked out, and, she's just struggling, and this is very common, in North America too, and I think this is the whole issue, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, to be a voice, because many people don't think about all the shelters that are just overloaded with, in many areas of the country, as well as in Canada, with women and children on the run from domestic violence and abuse. And you want to go into some of those shelters sometimes and check it out for yourself, or at least get involved and find out what's really going on, because you'd be surprised. We don't hear about it in the paper. Every time a woman's on the run from her husband, fearing for her life, and takes her children and ends up in a shelter, it's not necessarily put in the paper. You know how many people are in those shelters? And then there's men on the run from their wives too, believe it or not, or their same-sex partners, and they suffer abuse just as well. Sometimes they even have a child with them because the mother's nowhere to be seen, and there's nowhere for them to go, because there's rarely any support for men victims of domestic violence. But the thing is, there's more women, so that's why they generally try to fund the women's shelters, because there's a whole lot more women on the run. But there are some men as well, and we have to wake up and smell the coffee, right? This definitely affects everybody. And so this is sad. It's going on around the world. It's not just in our own backyard. It's everywhere, right? Rosalinda, 24, fleeing both father and husband. So here's her story. She says, "When my husband beat me, I went to my father's house, but he abused me again. Growing up, he had beaten me, my mother, and siblings, but I went there because I did not know where else to go," she says. "I am here at the shelter waiting for my case to be resolved, and then I will go back to my family. This is my second time here at the shelter, and the case is taking time because the court is requesting evidence, but my father has gone to the village and cannot be reached. I do not care if my husband does not look after me, but I want him to take responsibility for his child. And so here's a 24-year-old who was abused as a child and witnessed her, abuse within her home, and then married, her husband is abusing her, right? And this is quite often what happens, and you can imagine in some of these other countries, right, where there's, they just quite often don't have a choice. I mean, this is great that this place has a shelter for women, right, because so many places don't. Like Afghanistan, if you do some research on the situation in Afghanistan, because that's why I do a lot of research on that, because that's where my heart is really, as far as helping the children and women in Afghanistan. As far as international help goes, right, that's where I think those people need serious help because they're just being killed left and right, and nobody cares, right. It's very, very sad that the issues that some of these women in Afghanistan actually do run and operate shelters for abused women and children, right? But children have more rights than women, so quite often somebody will take in a child and they'll look after the children better than they would the women, right? So, but until the children, the girls grow up, and then of course they're on the chopping block too, right? But while they're children, they're looked after a little bit better than the women, because women just have zero rights. So there's women actually operating shelters in Afghanistan in certain areas that try to help abused women, and their lives are on the line every day. They're threatened to be killed, and they're shot at, they're blown up, and there's been so many cases of these women. If you read some of their stories, I mean, it's just amazing. If you go to the library and check out some of these books on some of these women who have written their stories and told, or someone else has written a story about these women who have given their lives to try to save women's lives in Afghanistan. It's just absolutely crazy. They just, they get threatened. Their houses get bombed. They have to move around all the time because the Taliban is always bombing their house and killing their family. So they move all the time, house to house, sleeping wherever, and they have to walk down the street because they can't hide, right? So that when they go to their shelters and whatnot, they're quite often shot at, and many of them are shot down. And I was reading a book. I'd have to get that for you, and I might do that. Maybe we'll talk about that like next Saturday or something. But this book was just so awesome, and I got it, checked it out from the library, and I had to give it back. But I want to buy this book. It's these voices of these women, these patriot women who around the world who have given their lives, and they didn't die. They didn't want to die. They just said, I don't care if I die. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to help. And I thought about that, and I thought about these women walking down the street with machine guns pointed at them, and they're just a target, for violence and for from the Taliban and other places in the world. So the book is not just on Afghan women. This book is about women all over the world whose voices ring out, So I'm gonna get that for you next Saturday because I don't have the link here right yet, and I'd have to look through my stuff. So I think what we'll do is that's what we'll talk about next Saturday because these stories were just so awesome, and I really want to buy the book, so I'm going to do that. But this is just the issue, There's so many people that are standing up to help people, and you can imagine in North America where we have freedom of speech, and people have died for this, right? Many people gave their lives so that we could have freedom of speech and get, the truth out there. And so many people still will not stand up and speak out, even though we have freedom here, it's freedom of speech, and we have rights and laws, and we have protection, whereas in other countries they don't, and they speak up, they stand up knowing that they could be shot, killed, raped, tortured, beaten to death, right? Bombed, burned, acid thrown on them, and they stand up. And that's why I thought, I'm standing up, especially in North America, where I know that my voice can be heard, and it's some people don't like it, some people don't appreciate it, but I don't care, because we have a right to stand up to protect our rights, and we need to stand up and protect the rights of all women and children and men who are, to protect them from human rights abuses, right? And really, it's so important to do that, because so many people don't have a voice, and especially children. And that's why I do what I do with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I'm so happy to be a part of that because, children don't have a voice unless we are their voice. And so there's so many of us that are standing up, and so many advocates that I know, and advocates all around the world. So I thank every single person out there who's doing anything to stand up for human rights, child rights, to be a voice for the people that don't have a voice, right? So much. So have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Take care, and we'll see you next week and whatnot. You can check my show page out and see when the next shows are coming on, and have a great day. Bye-bye.